Alright, this week's module is going to be on protein. Again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So to start off with, what is protein? Protein is basically just something that is made up of amino acids. And there's 22 amino acids, and they're used for different things throughout your body. You need all of them at some point. And animal sources are the only protein sources that give you all 22 in one shot. It's what's called a complete protein, where you get all of the amino acids, and that's why in general, it's the preferred protein of choice, and if you're looking to build muscle, basically give yourself some protein. Animal sources are a little bit better in that way. However, that does not mean that if you are a vegetarian or you're trying to be a little more health conscious, eat a little less meat, that you won't get those amino acids, because they all exist in plants. They just you need to eat different combinations of them because each one has a different amino acid. Obviously, most meat has protein in it, but there are plant sources: beans, legumes, and nuts. All usually are a pretty good source of protein, so something to look for if you are trying to avoid meat or trying to cut down on your animal product intake. First, the good parts about protein. Protein is needed to grow and repair all kinds of tissue. It gets a lot of credit for building muscle tissue, which it is very important for. It's also very important in your blood, your skin. It's used for your fingernails, your eyes, basically anything that your body needs to repair. It uses protein for that. It does not necessarily use it for energy as quickly, but it does like using it to build things. So it is difficult for your body to turn into energy. So in that sense, it's good for weight loss. Excuse me. Because like I said, it is not a primary energy source. There are a lot of places you can get protein from, so that's a good thing. There's both plant and animal sources, and they're good for you in that sense that they don't provide a ton of sugar for your body to use, but they do give you a lot of amino acids and vitamins and things like that. Lean sources of protein are definitely what you want to get as much of as possible. This includes poultry, fish, and eggs, and specifically egg whites. Especially if you're trying to cut down your cholesterol, is what you want to focus on, because almost all of the cholesterol in an egg, 99.9% of it, is in the egg yolk. So the egg white is basically just pure protein. It's a fantastic source. Anything lean, poultry, that's why chicken, turkey, most kinds of fish, great sources of nutrition. They're really low in fat, especially if you're getting those lean ones that we talked about. So they're just a great choice in general. Plant sources, nuts, beans, and legumes are all great options. Nuts do tend to have a little more fat than some other sources, so just watch that, but it's usually the healthier kind, polyunsaturated fat. So the bad part about protein, it is difficult for your body to use for energy. It requires a process called glucogenesis, which basically recruits the liver. It causes it to be stored, and then it has to be transferred. It's a very complicated process. It's very inefficient, and so your body doesn't like to do it, so it won't use protein for energy, which is a good thing because you need it to repair, unless it is basically deprived of any other source. So if you're just eating protein, you are not going to have quite as much energy. Another thing to watch for if you are eating a lot of protein is eating excessive amounts of fish. It's not really too much of an issue, but depending on where the fish comes from, there is a possibility of it having, if you have too much of it, it can be bad for you. Some mercury poisoning is an option, but try to avoid eating fish more than 2 or 3 times a week in general. Another bad thing is sometimes there are higher fat sources in some protein. This is again going to be the less lean animal meats, especially red meat, thing like that. So those are probably not your best choices when it comes to protein, because they do have that higher fat content, and they're going to tend to have more of that trans fat and the less healthy fats in general. Now the ugly part of protein, like we talked about, that glucogenesis requires the liver and the kidneys to convert protein to energy. So if you rely on protein for your primary energy source, it can be very hard on your body, and over time you can have all kinds of liver and kidney problems. This is, of course, if you're relying solely on protein for a long period of time. So just something to be aware of. Another thing that can be bad is some sources of protein can be very high in fat and cholesterol. We talked about with the eggs. It is a lot of HDL, which is the good kind of cholesterol, high density. But it is still going to give you a lot of cholesterol, especially if that's something you need to watch. Just be aware of that in the protein choices you make. And try not to make protein, obviously. As you can see, if it's constantly the primary source of energy, it can be very difficult on your body. So in general, focus on those lean protein sources that we talked about, the poultry, the fish, the egg whites if possible. Try to limit the fat in them, avoiding the fatty cuts of meat. Cut off the fat if you're preparing it. However, use just the egg whites instead of the entire eggs. Plant sources are almost always a good choice because they have virtually no fat in them whatsoever. Nuts occasionally do. That would probably be the only exception. Protein after workout is also very helpful because it does help. It's really good for building that muscle and just kind of repairing your the stress you just put on your body from the workout. So as long as you don't make your diet purely of protein and consume it in moderation, it's a good thing for you. Try and pair it with a little bit of those healthier carbs that we talked about, and you should be in good shape. All right, I'll talk to you later.